Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Gong podcast, hosting conversations about the earliest stages of startup sales and all the fun stories that come from companies with little cash, no precedence, and lots of guts. These are difficult times for people all over the world, difficult and wild, and I hope everyone here is staying healthy and comfortable and getting into their new social distancing routines, working from home, spending time with family. Not your elderly family, ideally, but doing what you need to do at this time. And times like these have an impact across the board on all people and all professions. But of course, it also changes what it means to be a sales leader. The conversations you're having with customers changes. Your internal goals and the goals of your customer, the priority of your customers change. Habits are entirely different. And my guest today is a sales leader in the thick of it, doing a remarkable job pushing his team and company through. Hector Hernandez is the VP of Sales and Customer Success at LaunchDarkly, a company that has raised over $130 million, signed deals with companies like Microsoft, NBC, IBM, Meetup, and so many more. And Hector has so much to talk about, and I'm sure we can conduct an episode a quarter and have some new things to say. But specifically, we focus our conversation on what his team is doing today to support his employees and his customers and strategize for sales success as the coronavirus recession and consequences bubble all around us. I learned a lot from Hector about strategy and empathy and selling, and I'm sure you will as well. So without further ado, and take some notes, I did, and apply them to your own strategies here. Please enjoy my conversation with Hector Hernandez. Hector Hernandez, welcome to The Gong.
Thank you so much for having me, Adriel.
Oh my God, in these wild and crazy times, we are going to bring a little light into the world with a little much needed sales talk. That's what everybody's looking for at a time like this, I am sure.
Are these crazy times? Is something going on?
This is going to be released during crazy times, certainly. Well, we're just making a prediction here, but we are recording in mid-March. And we will see what happens next. But I wanted to start with just some context, which is LaunchDarkly, your current company. As I was preparing for this, was doing my best to be able to explain it, but I think I don't quite understand it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about LaunchDarkly and what you guys are doing there?
Sure, no worries. LaunchDarkly is a feature management platform. We are really the industry leaders, and we are, the first company that really had a viable market solution. We've been around for a few years now, and what the solution really is for everyone to understand. I'll explain it the way that I explain things to my mom oftentimes, because software is an industry that she is not super familiar with, and I work for some companies that she's often thinking like, okay, work for Google or Facebook, and I'm like, well, those aren't the only two companies out here, but let me try to explain this.
Yeah, there's also Apple.
Yeah, I'm like, Mom, you totally forgot about Apple. And so I'll explain it to you like I explain it to her oftentimes, which is companies now have a lot of features. Every single company that you can really think of is a software company, from your favorite restaurant chain to your the place you go to buy hardware and all your tools, and to the paint shop down the corner, right? They all have some sort of digital element to it. And they're constantly pumping out more and more features for their products, whether that is the ability to do a remote order, right, and have delivery come to you, or whether that is simply being able to scroll through their website and take a look at the availability of their merchandise. All of those things are created in as features, and people pump these things out. Now, that's all great and good, but it's really hard to manage those things. And what LaunchDarkly does is it allows people to control those features, to be able to do things such as turn something off if it's not working. Let's say you are a large vendor that helps people file their taxes, and you have peaks at a couple of times during the year. You pump out some features that you think are going to help people, but as you know, it's always really hard to replicate what those loads are going to be, and something goes wrong, and you want to just turn that off because the one thing you want to optimize for is to make sure that people's taxes are being submitted. So we help people either turn things off, or maybe you roll out a new feature and you only want a certain number of people to see it. You only want people in Alabama to be able to see this new thing that you pumped out, right? This allows anybody in the company to go out there and be able to have control over the software that they have produced.
So you guys are, I want to kind of go back to those current crazy times, because I think it's a particularly interesting time to talk about sales, because you started at LaunchDarkly in 2017, and you ran up 2 years of the most incredible economy ever, where everything was booming. People were building new tools. People were investing heavily into new projects. A million new features were coming out on your favorite platforms all the time. Dozens of tech companies were going public, which only grew the amount of capital they had to put into development. That led to, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but an insanely successful 2019, where you grew to over 1,000 customers. You raised, very nice timing, but in January this year, you guys closed a round of over $50 million. Everything was going fantastic. And then in the span of a couple of weeks, things changed very, very quickly. And the economy fell apart, hopefully temporarily, but it was hit in some capacity. People have a lot of other things on their mind besides just work in a very traditional fashion. So I would love to hear, both specifically at LaunchDarkly, but more broadly just about your approach to sales at a time where priorities might be elsewhere, both personally and professionally and financially.
Sure. No, there's a lot to parse out there. So I will do my best. So first and foremost, kind of at LaunchDarkly, how we're approaching this time, and you're right. The last couple of years have been, booming economies, and everybody is spending and growing. One of the things that companies, and we started doing this, is trying to identify what kind of solution, how elastic are we in these times? Are we, there are two extremes, right? Are we a company like something that records audio, or something that allows you to do web conferencing? Because that is in higher demand right now. So this is actually kind of changing the trajectory of that company in a positive way, if there's such a thing as positive in these times. Or are you like in an airline where the demand has just completely gone away? And companies that are young, that haven't necessarily gone through these people don't necessarily know that yet. And we're going through that and we're exploring it. And that actually changes the types of things that you do. You don't want to take the strategy of an airline if you're actually more like a video conferencing company. And those are the two extremes, right? But somewhere in the middle is where you land. And we happen to, early indications show that we're probably closer to that top quadrant. And so a lot of the decisions that we can make, we have more flexibility than probably your average company. Now, also, hats off to the rest of the leadership team here at LaunchDarkly, and to our co-founder, Edith Harbaugh. She saw that this was probably going to be a bit of a tumultuous year. I've asked her if she thought this was going to happen, and if so, why she didn't give me a heads up. But she said, look, no, I didn't know it was this, but we knew that obviously there's elections coming. There's been rumors of a correction. We just knew that it was going to be a bit of a tumultuous time, and we wanted to, as you said, raise money at a time when the market was very positive, so that we could execute on our plans regardless of what happened. We have enough runway. We have years worth of runway so that we can execute our plan based on what we think we need versus reacting to what the market conditions impose upon us as a company. So we are very, very lucky to be in that situation. The decisions we can make to a certain extent can be made out of how can we come out of this stronger? Like, can we make some more strategic hires that maybe we couldn't have before, or that weren't available before? Can we double down or invest on, go to market for these efforts? Or can we optimize our messaging for these times? we have a slightly different playbook that we can follow, and that is available to us. There's a lot of other organizations which I, I don't blame them at all, but are in a much different cash situation that are now looking at how do we conserve cash for the long run. There are a lot of CFOs out there that are thinking, okay, I have 12 or 18 months worth of runway. How can I stretch this out an additional 6 months? Right? Where can we, and what can we do to cut down to make sure that we stay a viable company and a viable entity for as long as possible, so that we can weather this? And so the playbook that they will follow will be very different. Now, in these times, the one silver bullet that you have on the business side is revenue. And so the thing that you want to look at when your sales organization are a couple of things. Number one, once you determine your elasticity, also determining your risk profile of your customers. Do we think that attrition and downsells or contraction, is that going to be a bigger thing now? So we go through that exercise and you determine, out of our portfolio of partners, of customers, which ones are going to be benefiting from this potentially, or have higher usage, I should say. Which ones are going to be a huge risk of the viability as a company, or that fall into hard times. And then what's in the middle? So we have we have some green accounts, we have some red accounts, and then we have a whole bunch of accounts in the middle that are yellow that we just need more time and more data to be able to properly assess. And once we have that, then that also helps us determine what we're going to do. I will also be sorry. The last thing I was going to mention is that I'll be very transparent with you that we are modeling and we have a lot of different scenarios that we're working under. That's really challenging right now. We're kind of in the middle of the storm, and so more time we can buy ourselves to be able to pick up more data to be better informed. Really, the better we are to be in business.
Tell me about that. Tell me about your personal strategy for a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. Right now they say the greatest leaders are wartime leaders, where you're able to create a plan, stick to a plan. You're able to marshal your troops, and you're able to work under that immense pressure, because it's easy to be a peacetime general. Being the wartime leaders is considerably more challenging. When you yourself or your sales organization are modeling out your plans, what is the best way that things can go, and what is the worst way that things can go? And related to that, I'm wondering specifically about how you are kind of approaching being a manager at this time. They're both related and slightly disparate questions, but so much that I've seen right now, some of the biggest complications come from examples of poor leadership or poor management. So I'm curious how you're approaching. You have a couple dozen people under you, perhaps more by now. How are you approaching being a good manager, and how does that change whether things go better than expected for the next 6 months or worse than expected?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'll go back to one of the statements you made at the beginning, the peacetime versus wartime leader, and I think they're both challenging. Being a leader is always challenging. There are benefits during peacetime, but there are also different type of interpersonal issues that you deal with in peacetime, right? There is, when the market is really hot, just retaining your employees is hard. It's paramount, right? And there's always people looking at the grass is always greener. The expectations and everything. So the challenges are just slightly different, but I don't know if there's ever a time that being a leader is necessarily easy. However, when you switch to these times, some of the things you have to do are different. What I will say is, again, it's different for every company, because though all companies are refiguring out what this new reality is, what their new plan is, some of them need to take much more extreme measures than others, and that is there's not one size fits all solution for all of this. One funny thing that has happened to us is we spent like the better part of 4 months just planning. We're head down, spreadsheets. This is we've had some very some tremendous growth, and we by all means plan and have forecasted to continue that growth. But we were doing our sales kickoff at the beginning of this month, beginning of March, and me and my ops team and the finance team, we were all just thinking, man, we just got done with all of these planning, months and months and months of planning. After kickoff, we can finally start executing. Like, we're so excited to finally be able to see what all of our plans, how they play out. And we got to do that for like maybe 3 days, right? And then we're like, okay, cool, let's scrap that. That was a fun exercise. Now we need to figure out, what this new reality is. The first thing that really came to mind for me and for us as a company was not necessarily what is our new revenue target going to be. That is really important. That is something that we are working on and we're modeling in several different ways. The first thing we came up as a company is, what is our financial position and how do we best take care of our people? Those were the two major things. And so we've come up with, we are in a situation where we want to retain everybody and potentially be strategic about some of the additional folks that we can add. We are not in a situation right now where we're looking to save cash. So that conversation has been easier. But regardless of what position you're in, I'm a big believer in transparency by default, really, and being candid and honest with folks and helping them understand that these are interesting and difficult times, but we're all kind of in it together, especially this one. Literally the whole world is more or less going through these same challenges at the same time, and that it's okay, that we'll figure this out. A couple of things that are paramount. Number one is, what work is now. Just from that perspective, what is work? What do we do? And people that have little ones, that have kids, their life is very, very different from where it was about a week ago. And so we tell everybody, make sure you prioritize family, make sure that you block off some time. Our working hours are so different now. Like, now I take calls at 6, 7 a.m. and I take calls at 8, 9 p.m. But in the middle, sometimes you have to have blocks just to take care of family. I do Zoom meetings now all the time, and there are kids running around in like the background, and there are dogs, and there's cats pawing at keyboards, right? And all of that is okay. It is okay, because right now it's hard enough to just be human. It's hard enough to just work. And as long as we can take that little element of stress out of our people, I think that makes their life easier. So making sure that they're prioritizing things properly, that they block off the right amount of time, and that they know that right now this is just new. And if you have to have your kid, I saw somebody, and I can't remember who, did put a post, did have a tweet, or maybe it was LinkedIn, and they said, it's okay to have your kid on your lap right now. That is a totally okay thing, and I'm all right with it. And it doesn't mean you're unprofessional. It doesn't mean you're not prepared. It just means you're human. And the fact that you're working alone is a minor miracle. So making sure that the new way to work is there, and that you're doing things for your team to help them out. I've seen companies provide free subscriptions of the Calm app, or provide, some sort of remote therapist support. Those types of things I always think are very positive, because people need those basic needs in order to produce as a company. And the second thing is, what are you going to do now that your goals may be a little bit weird? So we communicate. One of the first things we did as a company is we came together, or especially as a revenue team. There's just over 85 of us now on part of the revenue organization. And we had a big Q&A. We let everybody know what our financial standing was and what our plans were, and that we were not having hiring freezes, and that we're not planning to do any of these things. And that settled down a few folks. And then there was questions about, what are we going to do with quotas? What are we going to do with, what are our SAL goals? What are all of these other things? And we answered them to the best of our ability. And by the time that hour was done, people were probably still a little bit anxious, but the weight had been lifted off of them. And I think doing that really early with your teams, whenever something slightly traumatic happens, and just being there for them and being transparent, does help out a lot. I don't know if that answered kind of completely your question. I can go into more details in certain places. But
no, it did. I totally agree. I think I've noticed that a lot, the humanity that comes out, and it can be quite advantageous when it's treated well, right? Every single seller and buyer right now, pretty much in most of the country, is working from home. So any conversation you have is under the context that there is, as you put it, a kid, a dog, or a cat running around in the background. And I think making sure your people are first comfortable with that new reality, and also helping them translate to be able to have better conversations with the buyers, with whoever the customers, is really important. So that's where I kind of wonder, one of the things you mentioned that I thought was really interesting that I think is great advice for anybody in sales right now is to take a look at your customers and say, hey, I got these 10 accounts. These three are doing fantastic right now, and I don't need to worry about them. These three are on edge, and what do we got left? Four. These four are in really big trouble. How do you change your messaging based on kind of your analysis of whether a company is doing particularly well right now? Maybe you got a client like Zoom or Peloton or Netflix as one of your clients, or a news channel, NBC, that's probably doing great, versus you have somebody who's maybe a traditional retailer or, God forbid, a travel company right now, and you just know that, like, very often their priority right now is not buying new things, it's purely surviving. How does your conversation and your tone and the way you approach a conversation change if people are on two opposite ends of that spectrum?
That's a great question. There's two sides to the messaging. There's internal messaging and there's external messaging. And this is having something that we've recently adopted has really helped, and that is having like a core set of values for your organization. Every company has a core set of values, right? But oftentimes the revenue organization has some uniqueness to it. So we've adopted a secondary set of values that really help guide a lot of the decisions and a lot of the ways that we tackle things. And we look at our values right now to try to take a look at how we should address some of these things. One of our core values is, that we have empathy and empathy for not only ourselves and for our people and for our internal resources and support teams, but a lot of empathy for our customers. And the reason why that's important is because if people are just really trying to survive, right now is not the time to say, oh, sorry, your subscription is due, your renewal is due at the end of the month, and if you don't pay up, we're going to cancel you. Like that is very, very short-sighted. And so internally we have a conversation about, like, what do we do? What is our messaging? What is the goals that we're trying to do? And right now what we're trying to do is we're trying to do right by our customers, and we're trying to retain, and we're trying to help everybody as much as we possibly can, because in the long run we believe that is in the best interest of our economy, and certainly of our company, of our relationships with our folks. So if people internally know what the guiding light is, it drives a lot of the conversations that they have. Now, you can't do that for everybody, but if someone is in a really tough spot, you need to be empathetic to the fact that they're just trying to survive. And the internal messaging also should drive what happens with folks that have a lot of usage, right? Like people that we've seen spike. We've seen, like you said, some of the industries you mentioned, and video game companies and folks like that, their usage has spiked. And so what do we do at that time? And how can we be extra responsive to them? So the messaging does need to be tailored a little bit, but it always starts with kind of some of the messaging that we have internally. The other thing you need to do around that front, I believe, is you need to shift your resources a little bit. This is something that we did kind of pretty early on. Is we have customer success managers, like probably most SaaS companies out there today, right? It's one of the first things you should start up is the customer success team. We have customer success managers, and the way that we hire customer success managers is we hire them with an expectation that they're going to take on a certain size portfolio, like X dollars and however many customers that represents, right? That's how we want to manage our CSMs. I'm sure there's, every business is different, and there's other ways to manage that. What we decided very early on is that we needed to expand our portfolio coverage. So even though it was going to be a slightly larger burden on us as a company and on the individuals, we needed to get more CSMs in front of more companies. And the way that we prioritized that was by that green, yellow, red grid that I talked about, right? The folks that are in red, anybody that for whatever reason doesn't have a CSM or maybe has a lighter touch point with a CSM, we need to double down on those folks and let them know that we're here to help and how can we assist How can we enable more use cases or whatever it may be, any technical support that they require. We double down on that. The SE organization as well. We have a post-sales function, which we call a CSE, a customer-centric SE that helps with post-sales technical stuff, and then we have a pre-sales engineer, right? So as the sales cycle is going, a sales engineer that or a solutions engineer that works with your company. Right now that we're trying to get closer to the customer and that we want to make sure that folks have the support and the things that they need as they're making so many changes within their company. Some of those SE resources are converting to CSE resources. Not forever, it's an ephemeral thing, but we need to be able to shift and within the structure of our company to make sure that we're properly supporting our customers. Also, AEs that may not always be involved in the post-sales process, we're now encouraging them and we're working closely with them to make sure that we're checking in on every single customer. So there has been already a shift in our resources and our go-to-market to be a lot more customer and portfolio centric and a little bit less new business centric. So new business is still super critical. It's just a little bit of a tweak and alignment that helps. So the combination of the messaging and having more resources attached to them so far has proven to be useful.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so interesting. When a company is going through, when the world is going through a difficult time, it's always important to put yourself in the shoes of your customer. But especially now, if you come with tone-deaf messaging to your customer, you see a lot of direct-to-consumer customers do this sometimes. They'll try to take advantage of a trend and it not go over very well. You might the Kylie Jenner Pepsi commercial or one of any million things where a B2C company messaged incorrectly at the wrong time. But if you can kind of gain the trust of your customer by putting yourself in their shoes for a minute and saying, all right, I know my job is to sell and to hit quota and things like that, but what is my customer's job right now? Because if their job right now is to figure out how to keep their store open or to figure out how to keep their employees from being laid off or to figure out how to avoid a lawsuit from something happening, or just how to keep their family healthy, they are not in a position to be buying your thing. And any heavy-handed approach at sales is going to lead to problems, whether that's in the short term or whether they'll just have a bad taste in their mouth at some point in the future.
I agree, and again, every company is different, and every company's output or outlook is a little bit different. We're definitely taking the approach of long term. We just have the luck or the planning that has led us to be able to do that. But I'm sure there are folks out there that are like, hey, I am just trying to survive. So I'm doing whatever I can, and I'm going to be blasting out folks any way I can because I need to sell in order to keep doors open.
Yeah, I
understand that.
Tell me that, Hector. Let's say you guys were running low on cash. Let's say you're still at a place like LaunchDarkly because it's the place you know the product well. And let's say your CEO came to you and said, hey, we've got 6 months of runway left. Like, this is not a time to be long-termist. I need revenue. How would your approach change? Yeah,
well, the quickest place to get short-term revenue is still from your existing customer base. So I think it would be a similar approach, though the messaging may need to be different. I want to think, and I don't know because I'm not in that situation right now, but I want to think that I would try to avoid having new business messaging be so COVID-19 centric. And I look in my inbox now and I understand why people do it. And I don't, I live in a glass house, so I'm not going to judge anybody. But every single message right now that I get about like, oh, now that we know you're working from home, or oh, hey, COVID-19 is going, like, I feel like it's not genuine. It is a little bit taking advantage of the situation. So I would like to think that we would do that. I would like to think that we would focus on the use cases that we, after talking to our customers, are of highest value during these times, and we would try to expand existing implementations in that way. We would also probably get a lot more aggressive on the pricing side, right? We would probably do a lot of things to I always say, let's not mortgage our future by offering some outlandish offered by some outlandish deal. But when times are really tough, you kind of need to mortgage your future a little bit, or else there is no future. Like, what are you saving all this for, right? So we would probably get a much more aggressive on the pricing and packaging side. We would. This is a good question. There's several different things that you could do. I think that's where I would start. So many things really are based off of the situation in which your company is in. At LaunchDarkly, our attrition has historically been so very low, and our customers have been not only so loyal but constantly growing. I think that would be the best tactic to have. And for us, our sales cycles are not less than 30 days. They just are not. Though some folks can self-serve online, that's not something that we would really be able to control. So it would have to be within our customer base. It'd be more aggressive on pricing and packaging. It would really be doubling down on use cases that are now highlighted or more important. Now, I'm not sure if that helps. I probably need a little bit more time to sit down.
In summary, Hector's answer was, I work for the greatest company on earth. We are not in this problem. Our product is amazing, and our customers love us. And I would do the same exact thing.
Yeah, it is. That's a tricky question. I would need to really take a look at the data on hand. There's things that I would say that I would just do, but without knowing the reality of that situation, they're very high level. Adjusting pricing and packaging, yeah, like anybody can really come up and figure that out. But it really is based on your situation as a company. If you have 3 months worth of run rate right now, or 6 months worth of run rate right now, your first thing you're going to do is you're probably going to cut costs. And how are you going to do that? You're probably going to eventually have to lay off a good amount of people. And then you're going to have to, those folks that you keep. And I've been a part of these companies too. It hasn't always been rosy. I've been part of RIFs, right? And I've had to make those decisions. And, keeping morale up after that is very, very hard. And, you start moving things and opportunities and trying to say, how do we optimize whatever we have here for folks that can accomplish our goals. And you just go really, really lean. The reality of if that's in the situation, that's what you're going to do.
Yeah. Listen, Hector, you and I have been going back and forth for a couple of weeks trying to plan this. So when I was doing my research initially, I was predominantly about how fantastic things have been going for LaunchDarkly. And while we spent the last 30 minutes on how challenging the time is, I want to make sure that our listeners know all the incredible things that you've done separately from how you're handling the current coronavirus crisis. Tell me, in the time we got left, tell me a little about 2019. You had some huge milestones that after a fundraise of about $44 million about a year ago, you doubled your number of customers. You got folks like NBC and Microsoft and Atlassian all as customers. Tell me a little bit about what it was like going through that time. And then kind of maybe if you could summarize it with, what are the 1 to 2 things that you think you really got right in the year of 2019?
Cool. No, that sounds great. 2019 was a phenomenal year. It was a banner year. We performed really well as a team. We also grew as a team quite a bit. So we were able to grow our revenue. But we exceeded some very audacious goals that we had for ourselves. We also grew the revenue organization by 3-fold, which is very, very difficult to do, right? Most people out there say you can't grow an organization by more than 2x. And we definitely tested that theory, but we were able to significantly grow that way. And we also became much more specialized and focused in our efforts. We have several different teams within the revenue organization. We have sales ops, customer success. We have obviously our AE organization, our solutions engineering organization. And they all became much more specialized throughout the year. We segmented, for example. So now we have SMB, and we have a mid-market, which we call the inside team, and we have the really large organizations, which we cover by something we call a field team. And the field team is, as the name would suggest, they are not in Oakland. We're in Oakland. We're located. We're headquartered in Oakland, California. And at the beginning of the year, everyone was too. We would all go in, and in order to have a quick stand-up meeting, you would just literally stand up, right? And everyone, the entire company or the entire team was around you. Now we are much more distributed, and we are able to have certain people focus on just a handful of accounts, while everyone else can continue the drumbeat. So at the beginning of the year, what we went into 2019 with was a very strong, predictable inside sales team. It was one team that was covering everything from 100,000 employees down to a mom and pop around the corner. They were just covering every single opportunity, but for the most part, it was all inbound. But we were really predictable. To Mr. Aaron Ross, his predictable revenue. That's what we were. That was what we had become. We had just become. We knew how many inputs we needed in order to create so many widgets. In 2019, we started distributing our organization, and we decided to make sure that people were spending their time wisely. So does it make sense when someone is closing, a relatively small transaction, to also be in the afternoon having a conversation for hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? It's two very different transactions, two very different sales cycles. And if you're managing all those at the same time, you're going to eventually treat them all the same. You're either going to treat the very small transactions as if they were very large customers, or you're going to treat the very large customers as if they were very transactional, small transactions. And so that was one of the major things that we did. Now, some folks on the SMB world, they continue to be very transactional and coming in mostly inbound, going through and more than anything, helping customers figure out how to buy us. Then we have the next level up, which is a combination of inbound and outbound, and where we're really trying to figure out and win opportunities, right? We were trying to set the stage for what the evaluation criteria should be. We build a champion, and then we go through, not always, sometimes there's a committee, but there's still, it's easy to get single threaded in that in that sales cycle. So we go through that process, and we close business in 3 months, right? Instead of SMB, which is 1 month or less. But then we have these large organizations where we just need to pay a lot of attention to them, right? We go through we follow MedPick. I'm sure folks are familiar with that. And we go through that entire process, and we build champions, and we change champions, and we have coaches, and we seek time with the economic buyer, and we spend a lot of time with procurement and legal, and we have 1 or 2 walk away points during the legal but this entire process takes 9+ months, right? And people are only focused on a handful of transactions, but they're local, and their kids go to the same school, so you get some information that way. It's just a very different cycle, and that has allowed us to have still the predictability that the inside team has always provided to us, but it also allows us to grow to tilt the growth trajectory, a little bit further north, which is always what you're working on, right? You're always looking at different things from a management perspective that you can do to tilt that growth trajectory. And this will lead into some other things that I think went really well this year, in 2019. One of the things that I think we did really well is that we maintained the idea of doing things that are stage appropriate. And what I mean by that is raising or growing a company, and I have little ones here, is not that different from raising and growing a child. My wife is a early childhood interventionalist, and so sometimes my daughter's off doing something that I don't understand. I'm like, why is she biting that kid? Or like, why, would somebody, put their tongue on a handrail? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me, right? But she always tells me, like, look, this is age appropriate. This is how kids learn. This is how they discover. This is how they understand. In a company, there are things that you need to do that are stage appropriate as well. when you are at the very beginning, just trying to figure out, what the market product fit is, who my buyer is, you're not going to jump into a forecast call and go through all of MedPick, right? Like it just doesn't, you can for certain aspects, you just have one or two customers, you can really try to understand like, what are my risks, what are my gaps here? But to a certain extent, you're just trying to get customers to talk to you. And when you have a motion where now you're starting to get a few customers, you still are not going to be doing these heavy-handed things, right? You have to become comfortable as a company doing things that are stage appropriate. Like, I forget the person that said this. It's oh man, it's slipping me. But you have to do things that don't scale sometimes, right? And you got to be comfortable doing things that don't scale. And that's kind of.
I think that was Brian Chesky from Airbnb.
That's not who I had in mind.
Well, maybe he stole it from somebody.
Maybe he did, but nevertheless, you have to get comfortable doing things that don't scale. And for me, you have to get comfortable doing stage appropriate behavior. So oftentimes you have someone come in and you're like, oh, why don't we have this? Why don't we have an ROI calculator? Why don't we have a proper BVA template? And it's like, well, we're not there yet. We're going to get there. And we love that that those are the things that we need, but we need to get there. And in 2019, we stayed true to doing things that were stage appropriate. And that has set us up for success now, right? We did things that at the time made sense, but we were comfortable knowing that those were going to have to change. And creating that constant change mechanism within our company and making sure that people are comfortable with that has paid a ton of dividend with us now, right? And folks don't always love it, but they always understand and they have the context behind why we're doing so.
Yeah. Hector, I want to thank you so much, both from what you shared about what you're planning to do in this difficult time, and some of the things you guys did as well in 2019 was so informative. I personally took a bunch of notes. So thank you so much for your time. I've got one final question that I just love asking everybody here. Can you tell me about an early sales mentor and something you learned from them?
Sure. I'm more than happy to tell you about that. I took a very odd journey to get to where, to sales and into software in general. I was born in Mexico City and I grew up in Denver, Colorado. And when I graduated school, I actually went to go work for an oil and gas company as an analyst. I was like the guy sitting on the corner, like trying to figure out what we're going to frack next. And I didn't like my job. I hated my job so very, very much. And I was doing at the same time, because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and because I didn't like my current job, I started to go into grad school. And when I went to grad school, my last semester, I got to do a project for this company called Solix. It's a very small company still out of Santa Clara, California. And the founder, Sai Gundavali, saw me present. We presented about how Solix could expand their market by selling into China. In retrospect, probably not the best advice at the time, but nevertheless, that was the project. And so we did that. And afterwards, Sai said, Hector, I would love for you to come, work for us. I really like the way you presented, but the only job I have right now is in sales. And I didn't know anything about software sales. I didn't know anything about software in general. When he said, do you want to move out to Silicon Valley? I was super pumped because I thought the beach, in Santa Monica and like Ferris wheel, like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And I looked it up, I went online. I was like, okay, Silicon Valley. And then I saw San Jose and I was like, oh, what is San Jose? Like, I don't know anything about this. And so when I moved out here, I was at Solix and there was only one other rep really in the company when I moved out. It was a very small company. And his name was Russ Puryear. And Russ kind of taught me everything about sales, from forecasting to how you build a champion and why it's important to go on site and why those hallway conversations are some of the most strategic, and how to prepare for a call, how you should always know as much about somebody as absolutely possible, and just laid the foundation very, very early on that I drew from for years afterwards. There's a ton of other people that a ton of other mentors that have taught me so much about maybe not the basics of sales, but really how you scale an organization and how you manage and how you treat people and how you interact with customers. But without Russ, I would have maybe packed my bags 3 months in and gone back to Colorado and, I'd still be in Excel in the corner of some office right now.
Well, hey, here's a big thank you to Russ for making it all happen. Hector, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Stay healthy out there.
Thank you so much, sir. Take care.
Well, there you have it. Hector Hernandez, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody, please stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves, your employees, your team members, your families, and of course your customers by being empathetic. You are welcome to reach out to me. I'm at @Lubarski2 all over the internet, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, even Gmail. Happy selling.